guys, so we have not been drinking as much milk lately. Chamomile is still giving us over 5 quarts of milk a day, just milking her once a day. I made a whole, let's see, I used 1 whole gallon, a whole 5 quarts yesterday to make yogurt and kefir starts. And this morning I got up and realized I still had 1.5 gallons of milk in the fridge that hadn't been used from a few days ago. And so this morning I took half of the fresh milk and turned it into kefir. So I've got 3 quarts of kefir developing the, what is it called? The curd? It's not the curd, the crystals, kefir crystals. And I still had 1 gallon of milk that I needed to do something with, because after 2 days we don't drink our milk anymore. It just doesn't taste as good as really fresh. So here's the older milk. And I'm going to do microwave mozzarella. You can do it on the stovetop as well. You don't have to microwave it. But I find when I veer from the instructions, I have a tendency to not have things set. So I like to have a digital thermometer, because if I need to go do laundry or something, I can set it on a timer. The bad thing about the digital thermometer is that unless I put this in a bag of water, like take a bag and put water in it and then put this in it and then tie it to the side. If I don't do that, what'll happen is as the cheese curds, it will stick to their thermometer. And when it sticks to the thermometer, it gives an incorrect reading. The temperature is a lot higher in the liquid than it is if that cheese is stuck on the probe. So it's better just to stick a little closer to your cheese and put it in a thing of water and stir constantly. It's not that complicated. It's just something you really have to be aware of, is that your liquid will be much hotter than what that will say if your cheese coagulates on it. So for mozzarella, this is my little recipe book, and I like these little tabs on the top because it holds my recipe. So for mozzarella, the recipe is 1.5 teaspoons citric acid. And I have a bigger container of this. It's just easier to get it out of this one. And dissolve that in 1/2 cup of water that is cool. So when this hits 55 degrees, I'm going to stir that in. Okay? And then I'm going to warm it to 90 degrees. When it's 90 degrees, I'm going to take a 1/4 tablet of rennet and put it in a 1/4 cup of cool water. Now remember, this is really important. You don't want to put your rennet into the same cup that had your citric acid solution, because it will activate your rennet before it gets in the milk, and then it's ruined. So you have to use 2 different measuring cups, okay? And different utensils as well. Don't use the same utensil. So at that point, when this hits 90 degrees, I'm going to add my rennet, and I'm going to stir it in really, really, really good. Okay? Then I'm very slowly going to warm this to 105 degrees, and this is where it gets tricky. This is where it coagulates on that. So you have to keep your heat pretty low and watch it to see if it starts to steam, because that means it's reached way over what you want to. The one problem I've had with this is if I don't let it get hot enough, it won't curd. So I actually let it get up to about 113 instead of 105. And then I turn off the heat and I let it sit there for a second, and I stir it pretty aggressively. And when I stir it pretty aggressively, what it does is it bumps all those little pieces of cheese into each other, and they start to stick to each other. And if I don't, and that's the trick with mozzarella, is you have to work the cheese. If you don't work the cheese, then it doesn't stick to each other, and it doesn't become like taffy. If you work it too much, your proteins are going to fall out, and it's going to make your whey too cloudy, and you won't save as much of your cheese protein. So, you know, it's something you have to do a couple times before you get it. Okay, once it comes up to 105, remove from heat. The curdled will separate from the whey, and what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to stir it until it becomes a big ball of cheese, at which point, that's what this is for. This is my little ceramic thing that I put in the microwave. So once it globs together like that, you put it in the microwave for 1 minute, and then you bring it out. you drain the whey into your pot of whey, and then you work it with spoons. And I will try to show you how exactly you work it with the spoons, because otherwise you have to put on gloves and try and work it with your hands. And I don't like to have to get on gloves and do that. For one thing, I don't like the rubber in my cheese. So I will try to show you that part of the process. Okay, we're right at 53 degrees. Make sure to stir it if it feels like it should have had enough time to warm, but it's not. So I have my citric acid in here. I've already stirred it up. So 1½ teaspoon citric acid and ½ cup cool water in a container that did not contain milk or anything else in it, because it will curdle it and it'll make it wonky. So 55 degrees. Add it to your milk. Stir really, really well. This is what gives you your correct pH, because with mozzarella, it's all about the pH. If you were going to make old-fashioned mozzarella, then you would add your, I think it's your mesophilic, not your thermophilic, your mesophilic. Do I have that backwards? I might. Starter to this. And then you'd have to let it sit at the right temperature until you hit the right pH. So the temperature is continuing to rise. And when we hit 90 degrees, we're going to dissolve a rennet tablet. So I'm going to get rid of this. I don't want this anywhere near the rennet, so I'm going to put this in the sink. Okay, we're climbing pretty steadily right now. We're at 59 degrees, so it'll be at 90 here pretty quick. So I'm going to stir my citric acid a little bit more in my milk. And by the way, this is how I loop it. I loop it through the handle so that it's not sitting on the bottom of the pan, or it'll give you a false reading. So here's my water. It's full. It's a 1/4 cup. And the trick with rennet is don't add it until just before you put it in the milk. If you put it in at the beginning of the process and it sat there for half an hour, it's not going to work as rennet. And so that's just something for you to know. This is what I keep all my starts in. It's just a little Tupperware container that I keep in the freezer. You want to keep your starts in the freezer. You can see I have quite a few. The one that I use the most, not this one. These are my rennet tablets. And this is the one I use the most. I think this is the mesophilic A. Yeah, so this is the mesophilic A, and it's the one for the cheddar cheese. So it would be the thermophilic that you would be using, because it's heat. It likes heat, which mozzarella likes heat. It gets very, very hot. And if you don't let it get hot enough, it doesn't work. So as soon as this hits 90 degrees, I'm going to plop that little rennet tablet in. I'm going to stir it up a bit with a new fork, just so that I know that it dissolved properly. And then I'll pour this in. I'll stir it really good, and then we'll move on to the next part. So you can see I just put the little 1/4 tablet in. I'm just going to move it around a little bit because we're at 87 degrees. Generally, the temperature for cheese to put in rennet is 88 degrees. And so I have found that you still have a little bit of leeway. Like last time I made this cheese, I put the citric acid in when it was about 60 degrees, because I'd added warm milk to cold milk, and that was the lowest I could get it. And so I just started it at 60 instead of 55. And this time I'm close enough. I'm going to make sure it's all dissolved, and that's what it looks like when it's dissolved. And it's only 88, but I'm going to put it in. 89. I'm going to stir that one more time. And then I actually grabbed some milk to make sure that I got it all. Then I'm going to stir it. Now I'm going to leave it on the heater. I'm going to leave it on the heater. I'm going to get this in really good. You need to stir it really good to get all that rennet in. Okay, so at this point, we're going to watch and see how long it takes to get up to 105. So I have it at medium low. Okay, we're already coming up. And this is the point I'm going to show you guys what it looks like now. See that cheese on there? You would think it wouldn't make that big of a difference, but it does. And so if you start to feel like you're getting steam off of your cheese, you know that it went way too high. Because 105 should only just feel warm to your hand. It shouldn't be painful to the touch. Pardon me. I did turn my head, I promise. And let's see, what was I going to say? So I just kind of try and keep that scraped clear. Once it gets up to 105, I actually leave it on the hot. I turn it off, but then I leave it on the hot spot. I don't know if that's the difference between cow and goat milk, but it seems like the goat milk needs to get just a little bit warmer, and I have found 113 degrees to be just about the perfect spot for it to start curdening up. Okay, so I'm not going to stir it now. And this is where it starts to do its magic with the rennet. But watch that. Watch that it doesn't get so encased in cheese that it's not telling a correct temperature. In fact, I'm going to just turn that down a little bit. Just to give it a little bit of extra cushion on the temperature. It says it's 93 right now, so we've got another 12 degrees to go. Okay, if at this point you start to try and stir your curd's going to get totally screwed up and only be fit for feeding to chickens and pigs. Now that being said, it does a good job at feeding your chickens and pigs. If you will put your whey that's left over or a ruined cheese, soak their grain in it, then it's really good for them. It's how we raise our meat chickens if we do meat chickens. I prefer to raise ducklings, but we have in the past done meat chickens. So I'm not going to touch anything at this point because the curd is setting. And that's why it gets complicated with this little probe. I need to be able to pull it out and make sure without actually disturbing the cheese. So we're getting close. Okay, so we hit 105 and passed it. So we're going to turn it off, and I'm just going to let it sit for about 10 minutes. And in 10 minutes, we'll come back and we'll work the curd. What you're seeing is that it has not curded. It is just kind of sitting there. You can see no solid curd. And so along that line, I'm going to have to heat it up a little bit more. And this is why it's nice to have a pig. This one did not set. Last week it set very quickly and it worked perfectly, and this week it did not set. When you do the cheese with citric acid, it can be iffy. So that being said, the last few times I've made it, it's turned out perfectly, but this time it didn't. So it's nice to have a pig if you have milk animals, because there's the one that works out perfectly the first time, and there's the one that wastes a whole gallon of milk. So when you have a pig, you know that the food never gets wasted. Hey guys, wanted to show you what it looks like when a cheese curdles correctly. So if you don't have a solid set, if it still looks like yogurt or it starts to go crumbly like cottage cheese or ricotta, then you probably didn't have enough rennet. But I did my clean break, and I'm stirring it to get some of the moisture out of the curds.